what she has to say is really important there you are. Hi, how are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you. We've been in each orbits, and I was just
We
telling
have.
mine that over 20 years ago, I hope you remember this, when you were first lady, you were so revolutionary because no one would let me talk about sexual health, especially among, and you organized the California Governors Conference and invited me to,
Correct.
and I think that was probably, and then we've been in the same orbit ever since, but I'm so
Yes.
to be invited on to share some thoughts with you and to talk to you one-on-one.
Thank you for saying that, Laura. Yes, I do remember that. And I have to come back to you now for relationship advice.
Love
That's
it.
that's a different conversation. We'll get to that at the end, which would be actually kind of funny. I just thought of that while you were talking. But I was just saying before you came on that I have so much respect and admiration for what you and your husband are doing to try to change other people's lives so that the same thing doesn't happen to them that happened to you and your husband. So I just want to begin with you, Laura, by just asking, it wasn't that long ago that you lost your son. So you
Yeah.
haven't even come up on the 1 year mark. And knowing a little bit about grief myself, it's such a daily process, right? I think I've never lost a child and I can't even imagine. But how are you doing on this given day?
On this given day, and that's the best way to ask it. on
Yeah,
this,
yeah.
I'm doing pretty well, and a little bit more than 6 months out, I have more good day. At first I was taking it a minute at a time, and then 5 minutes at a time, a few days at a time, and then a week at a time. And now I would say I can find my energy's finally starting to come back, and I have several good days in a row. Today is one of them. But I have to keep attending to it. And anyone who's experienced grief, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I've experienced a tremendous amount of loss in my life, both my parents and many key figures in life. And all of those were unbelievably devastating. And we know intellectually that losing a child, I mean, anyone, parent or not, knows that intellectually. But I still was not prepared for the depth and breadth and width of how wide and deep this kind of grief is, and this kind of
how do you deal with that? I mean, I also have lost my parents, and I always believe that the conversation about grief has to be opened up because some people, lose a pet and that's their everything. Some people have no relationship with a parent, so it's not a big deal. Other people, their parent is their best friend, so that's monumental. But losing a child, as a mother myself, I can't even I always say, I think I wouldn't even be able to get out of bed.
Had the same thing. And I've surprised myself and my family. I'm really proud of all of us, and high five on, trying to on what you said about the fact that we don't talk about this enough. I mean, that's the greatest lessons. Because I'm a therapist, because I try to live myself, this kind of stuff is important to me. And I try to live my life in such emotional integrity with myself. And I've done so much work on myself through the years that I think I was well positioned, as well as one can be, to move through this. But I've been, and I'll talk about some of the things that have helped, but I've been astounded by how many, because thousands and thousands of parents have reached out to me. I had to start a Facebook support group because so many parents have reached out all at once saying that their children died the same way Sammy did. And I started a Facebook support group. And what's been astounding to me is not only how everyone comes together, but how many people are stuck 5-10 years later. I can't even walk by my son's room. I can't leave the house. It's something that can really take your life over if you aren't committed to keep on living, literally and figuratively, and if you don't allow yourself to really process the grief. I think the reason that we have so much problems dealing with grief, any kind of grief, but especially big and the whole freaking world is grieving right now for one reason,
Right.
is that we're really scared of pain, understandably. Right. And so we'd rather just not deal with it. We think it's going to take us over. And the saving grace for me, honestly, has been allowing myself every single day to get quiet, tune into my body. I'm more in my body, ironically, with the worst pain I've ever experienced. I'm more in my body than I ever was before, because I have to take care of it. I have to move those emotions. So every day for 10 minutes, I may scream into a pillow. I may cry. I may just shake myself around. Something needs to move. And I've really tried to stay present with that. And in the beginning, I was doing that all day long,
Yeah.
And now it's 10 minutes at a time. And I think doing that, getting the support you need. My girlfriends, I can't even tell you, I had no idea. I mean, obviously they've always been supportive, but they started with a love bubble, and every other Friday they are there on Zoom, whoever can make it, just to be with me from the first week. And
wow. So several people are asking, where can they find the support group? Several people here.
It's on Facebook. It's called Parents for Safer Children. I think there's something like 12,000 parents on there now. And and they're unbelievably supportive of each other. They share.
So it's called Parents for Safer Children on Facebook, and it's not a private group. Anybody who's lost a child can come on there. Is that correct?
Yes. And even parents who haven't lost a child but are worried because their child is, someone reached out to them on Snapchat, or their cousin died, or, so obviously it's for parents, who are trying to keep their children safe and who have lost children. But it's a really beautiful community. I've been so appreciative to them as well. And it's an astoundingly painfully large community, especially of children that are dying this way. I heard you say, but as I was coming on, that Sammy died of an overdose, and that's what most people say, but it's actually a misnomer, because it's poisoning. He was
right.
Did not.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because it was drugs that he was 16 years old, correct? And that at home, that he got through Snapchat, and that he was reached out to on Snapchat. He bought pills, right, that he did not know were laced with fentanyl. And so I misspoke saying that's an overdose, but it's an accidental overdose. But how, when I read your story initially back when it happened, I was like, how is that possible that you have a child sitting upstairs and they go on Snapchat and can get these drugs delivered, and there's no safeguards?
That's what blew my, and it got even more crazy, because first of all, he was sheltering at home. He just said to me that morning, "Mom, will you come up and talk to me today? I want to organize an internship for the summer," because he was getting ready to apply to colleges. He would have been applying right now to colleges. And so I went out to do some errands with my other son. I came home. We went upstairs. My youngest son walked ahead of me into his brother's room, and he was the first one that found him on the floor, non-responsive. And the paramedics came very quickly. My husband was doing CPR until they came, and they weren't able to revive him. And I had never, honestly, the worst that I was worried about, or most parents worry about on Snapchat, because you post things and they disappear. That's why the kids love is naked pictures, or saying something appropriate that, or whatever. That's the kind of stuff that I would talk to them about. And my husband and I both felt, look, they're sheltering at home. They can't see their friends. As long as they're doing well in school, let them be on social media. That's their playground.
Yeah.
And so what I didn't know until then, and what I have found most parents don't know, I'm not alone in this, is that drug dealers are preying on our kids on Snapchat. And that is a place for kids. And it's not just Snapchat, it's Instagram, it's everywhere. But what blew my mind is that they are finding the kids. They're even using geo-tracking to find the kids that might be in areas with private schools, or where their kids might, parents might have money to pay for drug habits or whatever, and they target those kids. But they target all kids and the kids themselves. I've started to do a lot of work since then with the Organization for Social Media Safety. And, they were just recently releasing statistics that 75 to 95% of teenagers are talking about drugs online, are exploring drugs online. I had no idea that they could find a dealer, and the dealers were looking
right.
for. And
I didn't either. And my kids are older, obviously, than Sammy, but they're on Snapchat, and I had no idea that could happen. And I could think of like my son being upstairs and like somebody I think might be in Uber Eats bringing something over, and then it's a drug, right?
And he did it while we were asleep, because teenagers, at least our teenagers, just fall asleep later than we do.
Yeah.
So after we were asleep, they deliver it to the house like a pizza. So, and they say on their ads, delivered to you within an hour, and they'll sell you one Percocet or one Valium or Xanax or whatever. And
so did your son think he was buying a Xanax, but it was just laced with fentanyl? Is that correct?
Laced. Oh, it was pure fentanyl.
It was pure fentanyl, and he thought he was buying a Xanax.
What's happening is fentanyl. Let's just back up, because this is really important for people to know. I didn't even know about fentanyl before this. But fentanyl is a synthetic opioid that is twice as addictive as heroin and 3 times more powerful than morphine. And if you just think about a few little crumbs of it is all it takes to kill you.
Yeah.
What is happening is this fentanyl can't come directly into this country, but it comes into Mexico, is what they've discovered, from China. And then the Mexican cartels have labs, and they either make completely counterfeit, not just pills of every sort you can imagine that you can't even tell the difference between the real and the fake, but coke, even cannabis. They're filling with either pure, the pills often are pure fentanyl, like in the case of Sammy, or laced with fentanyl. And remember, it only takes a few grains of sand to kill you. So the reason they do that is that if it doesn't, they don't care if they kill you, but if it doesn't kill you, it makes you into a hardcore addict. So if Sammy had lived, he had taken something that was 2 times more addictive than heroin. So, he was going to be fighting addiction for the rest of his life after that. And that's what they want. They want to create customers. And now, and I think over 90,000 people died this way last year. And now there's been an 800% increase in the amount of fentanyl coming over the border. And so we're going to see a huge increase in this happening. I think Sammy was at the beginning of the curve. And that's what we're trying to do, is not only get the word out there that you can't take anything that doesn't come from a dispensary if you're in a state that has, where it's legal from a cannabis perspective, and that doesn't come in a bottle with your name in it. I met a family where their son died because he had horrible dental pain during the pandemic, and the dentist couldn't see him for like 3 weeks. And so his friend gave him a Percocet, but he didn't know the Percocet was counterfeit, and it killed him. So it's important that people know this. And what was really astounding, to take it one step further, is that while the police were still in my house and we were waiting for the coroner, and it was like this nightmare, I called his best friend, and I was trying to figure out what happened. And his friend said, well, he got this menu from this dealer. I'll send you the menu, because he took a screenshot and sent it to me. And he was getting these drugs to impress a girl that he wanted to come over. She didn't end up coming over, so he decided to take them himself, I guess. And that's what happened, just to experiment or whatever, because he had them. And thank God that girl wasn't here, because she would have died too, God forbid. But I go running to the police, and I'm like, look, here is the guy's ad. It has his Twitter handle, his Snapchat handle. You can catch him. And they looked at me and they said, we're really sorry. Snapchat doesn't help us. None of the social media do. They say, they cite the privacy laws from 20 years ago. And the only thing they'll do when we alert them of this, which we actually don't want them to do yet because it impedes our ability to find these people, is they will take down the profile, but then that person just pops right back up with a new profile. And so the only, so we can't find this person is basically what they said. Snapchat won't help us.
So Laura, I mean, this is like the most, nightmare, obviously, of a story. And to anybody who's a parent out there, who knows anybody who's a parent out there, this is so important, right? Because it's going on in our homes. It's going on with something that we think is just some fun little app that kids are using. And so you and your husband, together with Debbie Schultz, I know, have started something called Sammy's Law. And what is it that you are trying to do? Obviously, you're speaking out a lot. You've started this support group. You're telling other parents to have conversations with their kids. You're trying to get social media companies to work with you and put in safeguards. Is that what Sammy's Law is actually?
Law specifically is trying to establish that any social media company or platform that has children on it allow parental monitoring software. There is software out there. There are tons of different forms of this. I don't have any financial or any other interest in any of these companies. However, I've learned a lot of the biggest and most successful ones at this. And I've asked them a lot of questions, and they've been very helpful in figuring out what the limitations are. Basically, Facebook, for instance, allows parental monitoring software. Snapchat does not.
And why is that? Because I've read some statements just in preparing for this interview, even Spiegel, the head of Snapchat, saying, we're working with families. We're trying to protect, people on here, but we're also trying to protect their privacy and their data, right? Yeah. So, I mean, this would be a no-brainer to me.
I spoke to Ed, and I said, and so I have to say that after the news started reporting on it and we started screaming from the rooftops, they did help the police in our case. And then because of all the attention that's been put on them as a result of this, they say they've increased their police reporting or their police cooperation by 200%. Well, from 0, that's not a lot. It sounds like a lot.
Right.
But they're doing more to help the police. What they will not do, and what he cannot give me a good answer for, is they will not allow parental monitoring software. So you have to understand.
Why?
Because they're so because here's how it works. The parent puts in all of these search words, and they're constantly being updated. They even have kid panels that tell them the newest terminology. And so if anything about bullying, suicide, drugs, anything comes up that on any of your kids' platforms that allow parental monitoring across platforms, the parents get pinged. So I would have gotten pinged that my son was talking even about drugs, and I would have zoomed right into his room and he would still be alive today. But Snapchat, when I asked him why, he didn't have a good answer. They cite privacy laws, but what it really is that they don't want, they're so active of their data because they sell that data.
Yes.
That it diffuses the power of their data if any of their data goes to any outside source. So it's totally mercenary. It's totally financial. It's not privacy and that we have to protect people. When he said that to me, I was like, well, why can Facebook do it? And then he said, well, we're trying to create our own in-app thing. And I was like, well, who knows when that's going to happen? And who knows how effective that's going to be? Instagram tried to do that with an in-app parent protection, and the kids can just turn it off. So until you figure out your own, why don't you allow some outside? And he just wouldn't do it because they
That's
can't put out their bottom line.
So is Sammy's Law, if Sammy's Law gets passed, and I love that you named this after your son.
They did. I would have never had the nerve to do that. That was.
But if that gets passed, will that mandate parental controls for companies like Snapchat?
Both sides of the aisle should be able to agree on that.
Absolutely.
A platform that has children on it must let parents protect their children. And, the hashtag we have is Let Parents Protect. We have over 40,000 signatures on our petition, and the more, the better. You can go to parentsforsaferchildren.org, where you can find the petition.
We'll put that up.
Yeah, and all the links and everything else. And we are prepared. The bill is almost done. We're going to be bringing it forth. And then I would love as much help as possible calling.
Absolutely.
Because they're being lobbied like crazy by the social media companies. And so one call from a parent isn't enough. You know, the assistant to the congressman won't even give them the message. But if 15 parents call, then the congressman is going to get the message.
So there's so many people here are saying, you know, like, I had no idea about any of this. I didn't know about this. So thank you for mentioning it. We put up parentsforsaferchildren.org. But, you know, one or two people said, well, just don't let your kid download Snapchat. Well, that's easier said than done. I myself have 4 kids, and thankfully they're a little bit older, but my younger one is all on Snapchat, right? And so as anybody, you know, say don't download Snapchat is not really the answer.
No,
so
kids are digital natives. I mean,
yeah.
They run circles around us. You don't let them upload Snapchat, they'll make some fake account that you don't even know about. It's better to know. What we ended up doing with our now 16-year-old, Sammy's younger brother, is we talked to him about it, and he really didn't want to get off Snapchat. That's how he stays in touch with his friends, finds out what's going on. They're messaging each other all the time. Yeah. And we said, okay, and this I think every parent should do. And I did not do this with Sammy, unfortunately. We bought you these devices. We can take them away, and use these platforms. We have the passwords to all of your devices, all of those platforms, and we're going to check them and make sure they work and make sure it's legit. And we're going to do spot checks. And if we're worried about you, we're going to check even more closely. We're going to try to give you your privacy. We're not going to be on there all the time analyzing, but know that this is not a no holds barred place for you to communicate without knowing that your parents may check. And he has admitted that he behaves differently on there. You know, even the stupid things he says, it's not like this one is exploring drugs. In fact, now I don't think he ever will. But he has said that he behaves a little differently, knowing that we may peak from time to time.
So your suggestion, Laura, is for, first of all, to join once this bill comes forward, to join you in advocating, speaking out to representatives. And this bill is being sponsored by Debbie Wasserman Schultz, correct? So she has been working with you and your husband to develop this bill. And we'll have Laura back on when the bill is ready to be lobbied, because you're up against big social media companies. But to sit down tonight or whenever and talk to your kids who are on, whether it's Snapchat, Instagram, and say, listen, there are people out there who are trying to sell you drugs, and we're going to check on you. Is that what your best suggestion is right now?
All of your passwords, all of your usernames, for every platform you're on, and your devices. I can't even I have to go and get Sammy's death certificate and send it into Apple in order to get into his phone. I still can't get into his phone because I didn't have the password for it. So have the passwords to everything. And if they don't want to give it to you, say, fine, then no device. But and also tell them about this issue. You know, I did 2 different podcasts on my podcast, Language of Love. I did 2 different episodes on Sammy and what happened. And I have heard from thousands and thousands of parents that they have sat there, especially the first one where I describe exactly what happened, and had their kids listen with them so that they understand the full story of what happened.
So we'll put that up in this, because we're going to run this in the Sunday paper this Sunday as well. We're doing a whole edition on, you know, addiction. We're doing an issue on the pain that's out there on sobriety, because there is so much. The numbers of drug-related deaths in our country now are at an all-time high, all ages, right? There is so much pain out there. There's so much unknown. There's so many street drugs that are masquerading as prescription drugs, and there are so many prescription drugs that hook you, as Laura was just saying, and take you down a path that even many people never intended. Well, what I don't understand, they just couldn't also prosecute this person who ended up selling your son the street drug?
Found the person, and we just recently learned that they can't they don't have enough evidence because he didn't take the drugs the same night he bought them. He took them like the next day. They couldn't directly prove that this person drugs that he dropped off to my son were the ones that killed him. So and I don't even honestly care. Like, that guy's going to have his own karma. You know, that's not, I've had to let that go. That's not even justice for me. What is justice?
What is justice? Yeah.
What is justice?
Yeah.
Is stopping even just one more kid from dying. Like, every day I hear about more kids dying, and these are good kids that, and not that anyone's a bad kid, but they're good kids making stupid decisions, experimenting with stuff like we all did, but lethal. They are putting this in everything. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that, you know, the Section 280 and these privacy laws that are 20 years old, before we really had the internet as we have it now, before kids were all over it, no longer apply. And it's been a political and financial thing, the reason why those privacy laws haven't changed. But they are not in service to our kids. The social media companies do not care about us. They care about how many users they have, not the themselves. And we have to stand up and fight back. So if I can get this law passed and at least give parents the tools to watch their children, to intercede if something's happening, because we can't stay ahead of them on digital. No way. Not one of us can. But we can monitor them this way. And that will be justice for me. And I have to just mention, because I've seen David Kessler's on here. Hi, David. I saw him making a comment.
He's a great friend of mine too. I love him.
And amazing. This guy, he's the leading grief expert, for those of you who don't know, in the country. And he does free help for people at grief.com. But he made a house call to my house 2 days after Sammy died and sat in my yard with my whole, you know, with me and my husband and my other son bawling, and just launched me on my healing, and has been such a support, as has his partner Paul. So I have to give them a shout out. There have been so many.
David Kessler, so David Kessler, as Laura was just saying, grief.com. He does incredible work. Randy Elizabeth Kubler-Ross Foundation does, and also lost a child as well. So he's probably the only person who could have come over and sat with you.
So much with the guilt. I mean, you don't have any other job as a parent but to keep your kid alive. I mean, that's it when it comes down to it. Like, if you're not doing that, what kind of parent are you? And I remember him saying, because we were both, my husband and I, on our own, were saying, well, what if we had done this, or what if we hadn't done this, or what if we? And he said, look, I so many parents, and they did what you think you should have done, and their child died, or they didn't do what you did, and their child died. And you know, he's been a huge part, and that's been obviously one of the biggest parts of the grief. I think it's true of any kind of grief, but especially like this, of blaming yourself. I mean, how can you not blame yourself? How can you not feel like a horrible parent? But I will say that with my spiritual practice and my healing, I am developing, in many ways, a deeper relationship with Sammy now, in some ways, than I could have had with a teenager, you know?
Tell me about that. What do you mean by that?
I'm in communication. I mean, I know with every cell of my body that we are spirits having a human experience, where we aren't our. And when ours go, that's just the shell that holds the energy that enervates us, the energy of our soul. Energy never dies. And, you know, I knew that going into all of this. And I communicate with my parents, especially my mother, and with others a lot. I get information from them, or I feel a hug. Or with Sammy, I think, you know, it's evolving because I was so deep in the pain. But mostly I would meditate and sort of open myself. And I kind of, whenever I meditate, I move into like the flame of the center in the center of my heart. And I started feeling him in there next to me. And when I'm meditating or doing breath work or deep in, sometimes when I'm sleeping, he comes. And I get little messages from him in the form of signs or symbols. And I'm finally feeling I'm more and more able to, you know, have more of a two-way connection with him. It's just been so painful for so long that, and so hard to accept. But I can see, not right now yet, but I can see the potential of how this relationship can evolve to a place where I mean, I feel him with me all the time. And I sometimes feel a hand on my shoulder, or he'll say something to me while I'm sleeping. So I think that's going to continue to evolve. And I think that's a big part of what that understanding, that faith, that spiritual connection, and it's not a religious thing for me at all, I think is a big part of the healing and the growing.
And it's so beautiful, Laura, the way you describe that. And the thing we know also, obviously, about grief is that Dr. Laura can sit here today and you can see her as an architect of change, as a warrior, as a person who's going to change laws and change lives, which is true. And she could also click this thing off and go in the room and break down.
Tomorrow I'll probably be in a ball. Yeah.
Okay. And you still have other children to parent.
Yes.
And you still have a life to live.
Yes.
And I think, Laura, just to finally, and because this could go on for an hour, but so many people, as you were saying, people lose children. I have a cousin who lost her only daughter, and they can't, they struggle, as you said, to move on, right, at all. And what's your best advice, or what have you found to be the most helpful in that regard? Is it because you had your work? Is it because you came up with this law? What do you think it is?
I think that actually can be dangerous. I think it can be, I've really had to force myself not to do that, because that's usually my way of coping, is to go making meaning, to become the change maker, to find purpose in the loss. And that's all crucial. But you can bypass the pain by doing, but the pain doesn't go away. It stays in you. It keeps you stuck. And that which you resist persists. So it sucks, but you can't go over it, around it, or under it. You have to, and this is the only thing that will get you unstuck. You have to go through it. You don't have to go through it alone. You can get support from grief healers. You can go to grief.com. You can go to your community. You can go to your friends. You can come to parentsforsaferchildren.org. But you have to allow yourself in a contained and supported way to start feeling the pain. And what you realize, because we're afraid the pain is going to take us over and carry us away, is when you really allow yourself to just feel in that moment the pain that you're in. It only takes a few minutes, and then it's like a pressure valve has released and you feel lighter and clearer, and then you can move. It's when you're fighting against the feeling and you don't want to feel the pain, which is where I see people getting stuck the most. That's when it gets tough, and that's our natural instinct. So that's the best advice I can give,
is to allow yourself. So if you have lost a child or lost it, and you are sitting in that place, as you were saying, where like they can't walk by the room or can't do anything, your best advice, and this is one mother's advice, right, is to just allow yourself to sit and like lose it.
And be in the pain, and follow me on Instagram, because you'll see me doing all these crazy things, dancing, beating the crap out of a pillow. Like I've brought everyone along on the ride, and I'm demonstrating what's called somatic experiencing, which is a one of dealing with trauma and grief. And there's a great website called traumahealing.org where you can find a somatic experiencing therapist in your area, and that is basically a version of what I'm talking about. They help you process what's the pain in your body and in your mind as it expresses through your body. Get it out. Because if you don't get it out, that's what keeps you stuck. And by the way, that's what keeps you sick or makes
That's such great advice, because so much of we think our healing is intellectual, but as Laura was just saying, and that famous book says the body keeps the score. It keeps in it. And we often kind of divorce ourselves from our bodies. And we start doing that at a very young age, right? Yeah. And then, so I think that's such beautiful advice. It's called traumahealing.org, where you can find a somatic practitioner. And that's in whether, as I say, if you've lost a child, you've had a bad sexual experience, you've had any kind of trauma in your life, somatic healing is such an important part of your healing. I'm a big believer in cognitive therapy as well, but I didn't come to the somatic part of it till later. And Laura's so correct that it's all stored in here.
Yeah.
Right?
I learned that when my mother died, who was like my most devastating loss before this. And she died of breast cancer. And within a year, I had breast cancer in the same breast, because I went immediately to making meaning. I would be like, okay, I was taping a show for OWN. I was like, I'm just going to be okay. She's with the angels now. I'm going to write this book, Quantum Law. I made all this meaning out of it, but I didn't allow myself to fully be with the pain. And I got sick, and then I had to deal with it. So I refuse to get sick again. I'm going to deal with it.
Laura, finally, how would you describe how you lost your son? Since I said it in the beginning and I didn't say it properly, how would you describe
he died
that?
Murder. He died of it's called fentanyl poisoning, and I'm picky about it, as are a lot of the other parent advocates who died the same way, because it's a misnomer. It's different than overdose. Overdose is when you take something intentionally and take too much of it, or
accidental,
or accidentally take too much of it, or you intentionally, God forbid, kill yourself. Right. But this wasn't an accidental overdose, because he was not taking fentanyl. He didn't want to take fentanyl. He didn't know he was taking fentanyl. It's considered murder, and it's fentanyl poisoning is what he died from.
I love that. So that is such a great correction. Fentanyl poisoning is what we all really need to be aware of, alert to. And I think very often it's, written off, as you said, as an accidental. I have a friend who lost, accidental overdose, and you've just corrected, saying this is fentanyl poisoning, fentanyl murder. And this is a whole new area, right? This is a whole new thing that we all have to be aware of, and especially parents. And there's a whole big parent movement now around education, but this is around safer controls for you as a parent to know what your kids are up against out there on social media, they don't even realize what they're up against. And so that's where Dr. Laura is really changing the way we look at this, talk about this, and know about this. And so I want to thank you so much. You can follow her, as she just said. Watch her do she's bringing her grief to you, front and center. Huh?
Yeah, bringing my grief to you. Helping.
Yeah, I think
all in this together. I mean,
yeah. And I want to thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. I want to thank you for having the courage to do so, and really the generosity to do so, that I know doesn't, ease your pain on any given day, but you are helping people by the thousands.
That makes me feel, it doesn't help the grief, but it does help with, which is a big part. So I appreciate that. And I'm so grateful to you to give me this time. And
anytime.
I think you're beautiful inside and out. So
thank you. Thank you so much. And please follow Dr. Laura. And Dr. Laura, let me know when we can do this again.
Yeah, absolutely.
As the law gets closer.
Would you come on my podcast?
Yeah, sure. If it's about love and relationships, I'm not the person for it.
Aren't you you mentioned it, aren't you going to enter into it soon and start dating again?
Well, I don't know. That's a whole other, I don't even know how to do that at this age, so maybe I need a private session with you first, and then I can come on the podcast.
All right.
So I have, look, I'm a Catholic girl education, so I'm going to be, but I will. So I'll have a private session with you first, and when I feel adept at talking about it, I'll come on the podcast. How's that?
Perfect.
But I would love the help.
Anytime. here. I think even in this town, I'm in LA, so
Oh, good. Okay, great. Well, we can help each other.
that would be wonderful.
Thank you, Laura Berman. God bless you. And thank you so much. Remember, Sammy's Law. Please share this. We're going to put this up again, as I said, in the Sunday paper. Share it with your friends. Share it with anybody you know who has young kids on Snapchat. I'm going to share it with my brothers who have young kids on Snapchat. I'm going to talk to my son. It's interesting in the age group. You know, my younger son is the only one really on Snapchat. The older ones have moved off of that. And Evan Spiegel, we should be sending letters to him, and he's a parent. So,
but he's worried about his board of directors. That's it.
Well, really, we've got to be worried about humanity and our country.
Yeah. And make sure to have your kids listen to the podcast. It's called Losing Sammy on the Language of Love. If you go
to so we'll put that up too. Losing Sammy on the Language of Love. Follow Laura Berman on Instagram. Listen to the podcast. It's very, moving, and we will keep this conversation going. We'll stay on top of Sammy's Law. And I hope the conversations with Sammy continue.
They will, I'm sure.
Yeah. God bless you. Thank you.